So one of the biggest concepts around the whole identity profile, which moves away from a single typing system, is to not only lean into the idea of what your most efficient number is going to be, your headquarters, your home base, the place that you go to sleep and you wake up every night and every morning. We know that's a part of who you are. But we also want to talk about what is the experience as a human being when you encounter a number that may be very low for you? And what is the difference in that relationship between somebody who expresses a number high or efficiently, or they express it low or inefficient? What does it look like for us to have conversations around what happens to you if somebody interferes with your highest number? And what happens if somebody introduces your lowest number? Does it trigger you in a similar way, or can it have a trigger? What does it look like to be really efficient and really strong and really effective in a high number, but then be struggling to introduce or to utilize that number if it's low for you? So long story short, this series is going to be about conversations in each of the numbers as it relates to when it's high for you, when it's low for you, how it impacts you if somebody interferes with that goal, or if somebody introduces that unfamiliar space. Thanks for joining. So let's discuss the 4 nature. I'm always incredibly surprised when somebody takes the Enneagram, especially when it relates to 4 nature, and communicates it through such a reductive or stereotyped kind of way. And oftentimes, unfortunately, the 4s are one of those spaces that bear the brunt of a reductive or stereotyped version of who a human can be. So my goal with this conversation around the 4 is to give a lot more nuance and a lot more texture and context to what we see when we encounter somebody who is so unique in that 4 space. And we're going to talk about not only what it looks like to express that 4 space strongly, and for that number to be high in your expression, but also what does it look like and how does it show up if you are not familiar with 4, or you don't speak the language or the dialect of 4 on a regular basis. So when we think of 4, remember, we're going to talk about what does it look like to have the natural human capacity of individuality? What does it look like to be motivated and to seek out authenticity? And what does the natural gift of compassion mean? And how does it show up, and what does it look like to be compassionate? And if those words are said, individuality, compassion, authenticity, if they don't resonate or they don't have a lot of meaning for you, why is that the case? So when we first jump into the 4, let me be very, very clear here. One of the things that oftentimes shows up, especially as you just watched or you've watched before the video on a 3, there's a reason that I separate creativity from authenticity when it comes to 3 versus 4. Many people that I know that are incredibly gifted and strong in 4 space, or they're efficient in 4 space, they can have such a powerful imagination, but it doesn't mean that they have had a consistent production or creation. Remember, the root word of production is to produce. The root word of creativity is to create. 4s are not necessarily in a space where they actually move something out of their own space or out of their own essence into the world. So you can have your capacity as a 4 be profoundly high. You can have your imagination at a very high pace. You can be moving through the world, constantly imagining new and wonderful creations, but to actually get it out of yourself and into the world requires leaning into a little bit more of a space that is external, and the 4 is a really internal processor. So one of the things that I want to communicate when we talk about a 4, especially as it leans into that compassion, is the strength and the capacity of a 4 is built in its ability to understand depth, and its ability to understand beauty, and its ability to understand wonder and imagination and the big picture concept of how the world works. So think of a color wheel. The 4s are those colors that are saturated. They're really deep colors. They can see the entire color wheel, and that can be a blessing and it can be a curse. Because if you meet a healthy 4, their ability to just come up with something that is incredible in terms of design, just at the drop of a hat, is really, really profoundly gifted. The curse of that sometimes can be that you are so gifted at being in the space of recognizing beauty and recognizing passion and recognizing intensity and depth and saturation that it can sometimes become overwhelming. So if you're strong and high in a 4, what does it look like to be able to go, sometimes I have to restrain or pull back or rein in my tendency to dive deep, to allow myself into that quicksand of my experience to go, I need more depth and more depth and more depth and more truth and authenticity and meaning and connection. And then all of a sudden you're underwater. Because one of the analogies that I use for a 4 is the number one person to drown in a drowning event is actually the person who's trying to rescue the person who's in trouble. And the challenge for 4s is oftentimes we don't realize the person that's drowning is actually ourselves. So a lot of the times that we're moving into the world, we're trying to engage and serve and help and connect with other people, but it's because it's coming out of a desire to be able to connect with who we are. And that is really important. So consider what it looks like if you are strong in 4, if someone interferes with those things that we just mentioned. If somebody accuses you of not being authentic, if somebody interferes with your capacity to express your own individuality, or if someone says, I don't think you're expressing or demonstrating compassion. When you are expressing those spaces and you're striving and pursuing those spaces and somebody creates a buffer or a block, what version of you shows up when those spaces are interrupted? So what does it look like if you took your test and 4 is just a low number for you? And just as a caveat to reintroduce and reiterate, the test is a diagnostic, not a diagnosis. So again, when I reference a score, the test is not designed to tell you who you are. The test is designed to say, based on the information, what is this sharing with us and what are we learning from it? To take that diagnostic and go, what is true? And when you look at the nature of 4, this is a great opportunity to go, we can take the information and say this describes us, but it doesn't define us. And that's a really important difference. The information describes you, it doesn't define you. So for me, for instance, 4 is low because I don't have a consistent reminder of what it looks like to be my own person. My twin brother and I have an incredible relationship. Justin and I are best friends. I'm fortunate to have an older brother, Carl, and a twin brother, Justin, that are really, really close in terms of relationship with me. I grew up with people that I came to love, and they're great friends. At the same time, I grew up with such a constant reminder of who I could be or who I was supposed to be. As an example to share with you, when we graduated high school, I was 85 pounds heavier than my identical twin brother. So if anybody's ever had a body image issue and they've wondered, what's the real version of me look like? What's the authentic, physical, aesthetic of me look like? I went to school that every single day when I wondered, what would I look like if I was 85 pounds lighter? I could look in the passenger seat and go, right, looks like that. So my relationship with the authentic version of myself became a narrative that said there's other things that I would rather invest my time into, because I know for me personally, if I'm going to become the real version of myself, what I really have to become is my twin brother, to be honest. So in that space, I moved away from that because there was too much of a negative encounter with that. And I said, you know what, I've got other areas that I can succeed in. And I went high in 3 and high in 2 and high in 6 because it was more of a guarantee for me to figure out who I could be by what I could produce than who I was and what I looked like, because there was a better version of me that already existed. So 4 became low for me. This is where we look at the 4 conversation and say, if it's low, I know from the way that my brain works that if I start to encounter authenticity, if I have to connect with the real version of who I am, if I have to be compassionate with myself, those initial spaces are going to cause me to break a sweat initially, because that's not a natural practice space. So for you, when you're looking at it and you go, I'm super high in 4, what does it look like to go, man, I might be too deep. I might be overwhelming. I might be in a space where I'm getting too saturated, and I don't want to turn that off. But if I'm going 150 miles an hour and it's not safe for me or the people that are traveling with me, maybe just letting off the gas and letting the car slow down just a touch can be helpful. But if I'm low in a 4 and I go, man, as soon as I step into a meaningful conversation about myself, it doesn't feel safe. In fact, it feels uncomfortable. And I don't know how to suffer in that space well with other people, or work through that, or work out with other people. Because the gift of a 4 is compassion, to suffer with. So remember, as you go through this, whether you're a high 4 or a low 4, and this number is well practiced for you and you are well versed in it, or it is low for you and you are not well versed in it, the entire dynamic of a 4 space is to go, what is a comfortable depth for me to swim in? If you are low in a 4, what does it look like to put your toes in the water and know that there's not going to be a riptide that's going to pull you out? Especially if you're with people who are trained in being in the depth, like a therapist or a counselor or a spiritual director, somebody who can walk with you and wade into those waters with you. But if you're really strong in a 4, sometimes you can be so far out that you've distanced yourself from other people that you don't know what it's looked like to be able to find a lifeline. So if you're really strong in a 4, I would recommend every once in a while it's a good idea to put your feet on the shoreline, to touch solid ground, and to get in contact with what it feels like to be grounded, because you are so motivated by being enveloped in the experience. And that is a gift. It is a beautiful thing. But at the same time, you can become oversaturated, and you can have a law of diminishing returns. So all of these things are about healthy and effective workouts. So just to recap, as we land on that 4 space, the 4 is naturally gifted at being able to recognize our own individuality. The fact that you were born, the fact that you are still alive watching this video, and the fact that you are a different person than you were 10 minutes ago, physiologically, demonstrates how unique and how individual you are moment by moment. You will always have access to that. And the fact that you can be authentic and you connect with your real version of yourself, do the thesaurus exercise and see what words come up when you look up authentic and deep and meaningful and truthful, and see what is the vibrant nature of what we can do in relationship with ourselves and other people. And then as you exercise the gift of compassion, or you start to step into what it looks like to exercise self-compassion for the first time, and that causes you to break a sweat, remember to suffer with. Oftentimes, we try to do that in isolation, and the most beneficial thing that any of us can do when we exercise a 4 space is to try and find community that allows other people to celebrate you and carry some of that pain. So the final point that I want to make with regards to a 4 is around this idea of to suffer with. Anybody who is going to walk into a conversation of experiencing what it means to sit in something painful, not just something uncomfortable, but something painful, even to the point of sustained pain, which becomes suffering, is going to have to encounter a 4 space. And the reason that we can celebrate and honor somebody in a 4 space being so strong is because the reality is that someone who is in a 4 space and is efficient in a 4 space, you're talking about a human being that is capable of understanding beauty in a different way. Think of a person who has been growing and developing a human being in terms of being pregnant. The process of developing that experience, the difficulty and the discomfort in growing something and maturing something within you. And then you go through the difficulty and the hassle and the sheer unbelievable pain and suffering of labor and delivery. And then as soon as the baby comes out, hopefully if it's everything's okay and the baby is there and present, that you can talk to most women who have given birth to something, and as soon as the baby comes out, they've completely forgotten about the experience of what that suffering looked like. So 4s, think about it in their life. They're going through this process on a regular basis of growing something within them, developing something that is profoundly uncomfortable, and being connected with the depth and the center of their being, and knowing who they are. That to get it out of themselves and into the world is painful. It's a hard process to labor and then deliver something into the world, and the pain of it oftentimes can create a space where it is hard to finish that because it's so uncomfortable. So I encourage you, if you're high in a 4, most of the time, not all of the time, because realistically we have to be pragmatic and we have to be realistic. Not every time that when that thing gets birthed is it going to be life. It's sometimes not. Sometimes our imagination and our goals are stillborn. That's the reality of what happens, and we have to grieve that. But when you look at 4 energy, if we are going to process sadness, if we are going to reconcile grief, if we are going to work through really traumatic events relative to our own lived experience, the space to be able to carry pain and be able to birth real life that brings joy is going to require compassion. And for us to be self-compassionate, we're going to have to exercise 4 space. So even if you're high in 4, self-compassion can oftentimes be a mirage. It can be an illusion. And if you're low in 4, being able to even effectively understand what self-compassion looks like is not something that you've exercised. So no matter where you fall on the spectrum of the continuum for 4 space, being able to walk with other people, letting other people carry pain with you, is going to be a really important aspect of what it looks like to exercise 4 in a healthy manner. So I encourage you to do that again through whatever support system and whatever means is most life-giving for you. Thanks so much.